for or thereabout $1 billion. So we've seen this coming down gradually, and now we're looking at the GDP today, saying that all sector is contributing far less into our GDP. Non-oil sector for the third quarter was a paltry 0.03%. That is fire on the mountain. Where do we go from here? And that takes us to the final part of the future that Emefiele talked about. We need growth-oriented fiscal policies. We need to tame inflation. We need to rejig our currency system, our currency market, rules and regulations. And the central bank is grappling with this. You know, someone on a trapeze and has about 2 balls in his hand, then you throw another 2, and another 2, and another 2, and another 2, and another 2.
It's quite almost impossible to juggle all
so
of
you
like
keep juggling while
balls.
you're trying to maintain your balance in a circus. And that is what Emefiele is the man now who is hanging upside down, as it were, in the market and the economy. And everybody is looking at him. He's the whipping boy at the moment. Now, this morning, inflation from Emefiele and the Statistics Office is not going to help. The meeting they're getting into today, ending tomorrow, as far as the GDP data, is not going to help the interest rate. What is my take? There will be no movement on interest rate. MPR will remain unchanged.
Yeah, but you see, in line with what you've got from the MBS this morning, you have the economy showing that it's contracting further, minus 2.24%. At least there should be an easing, if not maybe the monetary policy rate, maybe the CRR.
It was a maybe here, and go back to it. Ojidem is a financial management consultant, and I'm sure he's going to speak more like an economist. Every economist have 2 hands, 2 corners of our mouth. Well, if you do this on one hand, then on the other hand, if you do this. Now, that's a problem here. It's a very delicate balancing. If you want to ease interest rates, it's a very tight walk. Go read the back page of the Punch newspaper today and read the Monday comments opinion page by economists, the elderly man by the name Henry Boyo. And you find out as economists, even at the middle point of it, he was giving this solution and this solution, and there was no conclusion. And I took time to read it this morning. It was neither here nor there. You have to either do this, this is what you get. If you do this, this is what you get. Either way, it's a very delicate balancing. And the only way to balance this delicateness is to move from the policy side. You need massive fiscal policy redirection to move things in favor of the central bank to better manage the remaining money, the remaining tea in our teacup. Because that is the issue here. The cup is half empty, not half full. That's where we are in Nigeria. And this is half. You just can't say it. But it's half inside. So it's bleeding. Okay. So now your accretion to the cup is getting smaller. And the way it's coming out here is a lot more. So the roof is leaking. So you need to mop up very massively. But you need the fiscal side to help things. 200,000 jobs is good if it comes out. But I tell you that 200,000 jobs is not going to the core productive sector that can grow your non-oil sector rapidly.
Especially when you have, the last PMI showed that more companies are, letting staff go because there's really nothing to do. You don't have infrastructure, you don't have money, you can't access your materials to do your products.
Where we are today, going back to Emefiele's address on last week Thursday, because over the years, and this is bringing a lot of things into my head, but I don't want to just say them here. How did we end up with years in which we invested not in power? We didn't pay contractors, and we're getting that news. We didn't even pay pension liabilities of workers, even when we have oil at $120 a barrel. A lot of questions needed to be answered by the past administrations, because you just can't understand why folks are angst over their salaries and don't get pension liabilities. How come that the past administrations approve projects, but no cash to back them up? Where did all the money go? We need to find this out. And this is a very crucial issue. So if you ask me this morning, perhaps I'm leaning a little bit towards President Buhari himself and say, look, there are a lot of past mistakes that that the current administration is trying to address. Now, that means that we need to find answers. Where did all this money go? But part of the money, we just frivolously frittered away over almost an 8-year period through the BDCs. Now, instead of giving this money to the productive sector, the banks were also at the back door doing their own game. The BDCs were doing their own game. The central bank in those years were just sitting happy and everybody was enjoying the party. Now the party is over, as it were. Now the rainy season that was talked about is now here.
And, even part of the speech, you talked about the banks. The banks definitely will have their day in the sun. We'll definitely try to get them to come into the studio to talk more about it. But even at that, a lot of what he said, that they're going to continue to use moral suasion to encourage commercial banks to be more considerate in interest rate charges to customers. And that's one of the main reasons, a lot of people are hoping that this particular meeting will not be a case of do nothing, like you already rightly said.
It's going to be it's going to be very tough for the central bank to look inflation in the eye, look GDP in the eye, and say, look, I'm going to cut interest rate. You can't tighten it anymore. You can only leave it, hoping that between now and January, when the MPC meets again for the first time in 2017, something would have happened, something positive, something that, from the fiscal side. Because the central bank, the Nigerian central bank, like central banks around the world are getting to a point when it is becoming difficult for them to have new tools to battle the global, local economic conundrum they face. So their tools are getting exhausted. What else do? You have your treasury bills at about 18% already. You want to go to 20? You can't. So, and of course, look at the last bond auction. You have serious issues because we didn't get as much as we wanted. We put 95 billion on the table. We sold about 40 billion.
About 35 billion.
About 85 billion or there, about less than 40 billion. Investors are asking for higher yields. Where were you going to give them? We're going to run into serious inflation.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, inflammable.
Inflammable. All right. So we'll talk more about this with Orji Udemuzi, who'll be coming on in just a bit. But Bosun, thank you so much for teeing off the conversation, for joining in on the conversation.
Yeah, with the tea and teeing it up.
Oh, yes. That's true. Business Morning, we'll be right back.